And now, how long have you been in Spain?
So
Or in?
I've been in Spain a little bit over 4 years.
Okay. And in that time, have you had any, encounters with anyone, or have you been able to compare and contrast the experiences that you've had being a black woman overseas versus, in the
For
States?
sure, for sure. So I want to start by saying with, everything that I'm sharing is my experience. It's not
Sure.
like the black
Of
experience, you
course.
know.
Thank you for
Do
thank you
you know
for
what I
saying
mean?
that.
Because there's like kind of like
Yes.
that expectation,
People, I
you
heard
know.
on the whole five fists, this is how black people are treated in
So,
Spain.
right, it's like no, this is
Period.
this is my experience.
Yeah.
So my experience has been it's been interesting because I think as Black Americans and what we kind of were raised in, right, the sort of trauma that we were raised in, there's like a lot of expectations when we go somewhere else of how we're going to be treated or
Right.
not treated, right?
Mhm.
Um, so for example, I remember I was riding my bike and an old man hit me with a cane.
What?
Hit me with a
I
cane.
don't mean to
And he
laugh.
hit
That's not
and
funny,
he
but
was
it's
an
funny.
old man and he hit me with the cane as I was crossing the street because I guess he thought I was going to hit him. Now, mind you, I'm just like afraid to be in the street. So the last thing I was doing was like weaving and bobbing.
Look,
I was just
biking
trying
is
to
no joke in Europe. For anyone who
right.
hasn't
I was
been,
just
it's like you get out of the way. There's whole entire bike lanes, not like a
right. I
little
was like, I just want to get into the bike lane. Like
right.
I wasn't trying to like listen. And he hit me, and I was like, racism. That was the first thing that I thought because I was like, I bet you wouldn't have hit,
Right,
a white
right.
person like that, right? And it
Mhm.
may or may not have been true. But the
Mhm.
reality is, in Spain, for me, I feel like people see me first as an American.
Mhm.
So with that, there's a lot of assumptions about privilege.
Mhm.
So it's like, okay, so you're American, you live here, you must be rich,
Mm.
right? So most people, and they also, particularly then before COVID, they would assume that I was a tourist.
Mhm.
So it's like, so not only are you American and you're rich, but you're here to spend money. So
Mm.
the way people would receive me were more like open, like come on in,
Ah.
what can I get you,
Mhm.
like because it's a tourist based city. So
And
it's
then you're
like, oh,
like,
you must
"Wait,
have
what's
some
happening
right,
here?"
you must have some money to spend, right? So and I joke with I have a friend from Minnesota that's here who's also a yoga instructor,
Uh-huh.
and I joke, I'm like, I'm walking around this bitch like I'm like Rihanna. You know what I'm saying? I was like,
Right.
this is all right, right? And my father came to visit a couple times, and he had the same treatment. Like they were so kind and
Mm.
so like open. It's almost like they thought that he was like a retired NBA player. Like the
Wow.
the treatment was like up there. Now that's my experience, right?
Right.
Now it's interesting because culturally it's super different because most of the black folks are African, like
Mhm.
from Africa, right?
Mhm.
From the directly from the continent.
Mhm.
And the connection between the Africans and the African Americans, it's not really there. So
Mm.
a lot of times I would find myself, I mean, I still do this. Like I'll walk down the street and, in the States, if you see a black person or a person of color and you're in a mostly white space, you kind of, you give the
Right.
nod, you
Give the
give the
nod.
you get or you give something,
Right.
hola,
Acknowledge.
something,
Yeah.
right? Here they don't do that, or
Mm.
at least they don't do it with me. So maybe they
Mhm.
do it with one another, but
Mhm.
I'm clearly not. Um, I get ignored,
You're
so I'm
not
like hola,
down.
right? Like I'm like hola, and they're just like
Mm.
they ignore me. So it's not not everybody,
Right,
not
right.
all the time, but it's definitely completely different than the community sense that we
Mhm.
have here. Um, Now I have a friend who is Nigerian, and we look like we could be relatives,
Mhm.
and I think because of her accent. So
Mhm.
people speak to me in English, even if I'm trying to practice my Spanish. They're like in English.
Right.
But because of her accent, they assume she told me that she's a prostitute.
What?
Yeah, they assume
Wow.
she's a prostitute. So it's very, very different. So it's not
Mhm.
that, oh, there's no racism in Spain. Yeah, there is racism in Spain, definitely towards Africans, definitely towards um, the Arab communities.
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
sure there's, racism even towards the Chinese communities. There's a lot of
Right.
Chinese folks here, but for the Americans, it's more like, oh, you're an annoying,
Right.
American.
Right.
So it's
So
like
there's this
here, it's like
different
I'm
type of
American. It's like I'm American before I'm black.
right. So you have to kind of manage that other stereotype in before your blackness comes
Which is
into
so
play.
interesting to me because I'm like, how do you know I'm American? I didn't even say
Right.
anything yet.
Right. Right. It
You
is
know, like I couldn't
interesting.
I couldn't be from like Brazil.
Right. You
Do you know
could.
what I mean? No,
You could.
exactly. But they seem to
They
know.
know.
This is the style, the way you walk. I mean,
Right.
everything. They're like,
Interesting.
and it's not,
Interesting.
not in an obnoxious way, but it's just a different dynamic. So like
Yeah.
when I see the racism that I feel like, black folks, particularly men, face in the United States, that's how I see young Arab men being
Mhm.
treated in Spain, like,
Mhm.
America's most wanted. So
Wow.
it's interesting to be on the outside and the observer of like that whole dynamic rather being so much in the inside. And this is just my experience, but
Sure. And that's
it's
all we're doing. I mean, with this conversation is really all we can do is speak to our own experiences. I mean, we could read a lot of
right,
books and feel like we know a few things because somebody else said it. But when it comes down
right.
to it, life is about, in my view, a series of personal experiences, and we're
Mm,
looking through our own lenses. And so, whatever you're experiencing is your reality. And I'm really grateful that you're sharing so much and being open and coloring some of what you've experienced since you've been there, and also and I think you already answered the second question I have.